and welcome to our webinar about the state of payment operations in 2022. My name is Chris Frakes. I run content at Modern Treasury, and today I'm joined by our co-founder and CEO, Dimitri Dadiomov, our COO, Rachel Pike, and our head of payments product, Connor Lanman. Thank you all for being here today. Before we jump in, I want to level set on what we mean when we say payment operations. Payment operations are the constellation of activities that surround a payment. That's the compliance programs, the approval rules, payment initiation, transaction tracking, ledgering, investigation, and there's a lot that encompasses and goes into those processes, and it's ever changing with the landscape of payments. Dimitri, I'm wondering if you could help illuminate how the current landscape is influencing the need for better payment operations.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for being here. There's three pieces three trends that are really pushing kind of the current moment around payments. The first one is we all read the news. We all know there's a lot of volatility in the market. Finance teams are always under pressure to do things efficiently, do things in a serious manner, steward the business as they handle the company's money. But it's actually more complicated than it has been for a long time, because there's a lot of embedded payment use cases that are coming as well. And so the balances that happen between, the day-to-day and the strategy of the company, between operating things with the talent and the tech budget that you have versus what you need in order to build that are particularly accentuated, I think, at this time. So the embedded payments piece has really been a new component of the picture. All of a sudden, we have a lot of companies that are handling software where every payment, it starts and ends in software, and it's no longer a manual process. There's a lot of, manual processes, a lot of digital binders, if you will, that are being uploaded and downloaded in CSVs and PDFs and things like that in normal operations. That's very different when you all of a sudden get into an environment where the product is moving money. You have API connections, you have applications, mobile, web, et cetera, that are actually connected through kind of the bank to software interface. And we spent a lot of time thinking about that and the challenges that poses. A number of folks, Wired, Bain, and others, have done studies and kind of forecasts, and the number of third-party payments that are being run by companies is growing to 100 to 138 billion by 2026 and so on. So there's a lot of interesting trends around. It's not just fintechs, it's really vertical SaaS companies, it's lots of different use cases. And then the third trend that is coming to the US that has a lot of people very excited, but also operationally challenging some elements of the finance stack, is the coming of real-time payments. Real-time payments has two instantiations in the US. There's RTP and there's FedNow. We can talk about that later. FedNow has RTP is live. FedNow has a roadmap now and a timeline to go live this summer. And really what it means is that a lot of processes go from batch-based to real-time. And while that's very exciting for customers, there's a lot of customer delight that comes from that. It is also much more challenging for a finance team and a payment ops team to handle things on the day-to-day basis. And so, there's a mind shift that's happening. There's new technology that's coming. There's new use cases, and between, all against the backdrop of more volatility. So when we look at those three trends, those are all kind of making payment operations much more front and center for companies that are handling third-party payments, embedded payments, and use cases like that.
Yeah, that's super helpful context, Dimitri. Now that we've heard why payment operations is increasingly relevant for consumers and businesses alike, Rachel, I'm wondering if you could take us through some of the key takeaways from our recent report.
Sure, happy to. Thanks for having me, Chris. So this is our second annual partnership with Harris Poll, just to sort of lay the background of what the themes I'm going to pull out. It was a public survey. We got over 300 respondents. They're all financial decision makers for payment operations and payments challenges inside their own companies. And there are companies of many hundred to many thousands. So that like mid-size to large size, 500 to 5,000 range. So that's the audience that we're representing in the themes that I'm going to move into. And there's obviously a lot of detail and rigor behind it, but we heard four sort of distinct themes and areas. So the first is that payments are really slow and really manual and very sort of cumbersome and hard to manage. On the slow side, so 2/3 of our audience for this report said that they are wasting too much time on payment operations. And to actually put a number behind that, there's about 1/3 of them said they lose a day a week towards payments, like managing process payment operations. So huge pain on the like slow side of just getting things through the system. Of course, we heard about how long it takes ACH to land, and then, relatedly, the excitement about what Dimitri laid out for real-time payments. On the manual side, 80% said half of their payment operations processes are manual. And I think even more surprisingly, the number of systems that are used to manage a payments process inside a company are between 9 and 10. Which is just, it's sort of an astounding number. So the first sort of theme is around like slow, cumbersome, manual, hard, I would say. The second thing we heard is not only where we're at today, but there's sort of a groundswell for change out there. So Dimitri talked a little bit about why now is the moment and some of the themes and trends that are pointing to why now. But we also hear that more inside a company. So our decision makers are saying like they're facing problems right now in front of their nose. And almost 100% of them, 96%, are thinking about investing in this area this year, like next 12 to 18 months. This has risen in priority. There's real decisioning and rethinking happening in this space. And that's up 15% from the previous year. So there's a sort of trend and change towards taking action towards more modern and more technical and technological solutions. The third thing we heard is that dealing with payment operations, so better, more streamlined payment operations, is a strategic advantage, not just for the finance or payments team or product team, but for the entire business. So almost 100% said the company would benefit from faster, more automated payment operations. And just to tick into that a little more, they're talking about saving money and efficiency. That references some of the manual, cumbersome problems I just talked about. Improving customer experience and providing customer delight. And then reducing payment failures, issues, exceptions, things that happen that require investigation and sort of weight behind them. And any reduction in that is a real value to the business. So if they do all that work and you capture all that benefit, then suddenly you have teams that can focus on the real core business strategy and the meaning and purpose behind their team, as opposed to managing these cumbersome payment processes. And we're seeing a big recognition that that would be an advantage that these teams could take advantage of, self-reported recognition. Last thing, you have all this recipe of like manual processes, real, groundswell desire for change, but there are barriers in the way. There are things stuck in the mud. So we have 90% saying it's a priority, but 80% saying there's things in their way, barriers to entry. And the two top ones we heard, this is very diverse to the team or the company where we're hearing the feedback, but the two top ones we heard were access to technical resources and concerns about changing processes. These, as Dimitri alluded to, finance and payments teams are custodians of their business. They're handling cash and money. And so there's some fear to changing existing processes. And we heard that from the market kind of loud and clear.
Thanks, Rachel. I know you just ran through a lot of data. One thing that you said at the very beginning really struck me, which is that companies on average use between 9 and 10 systems to currently manage their payment operations. That's astounding. That's a lot of systems. And, one of the barriers to entry to investing is concerns over existing processes. And can you share insights you've had as you talk to companies who are trying to streamline this?
Yeah, I agree with you. To me, presented a bunch of stats, but that's the one that just lodges in my brain, like 9 to 10 systems. That's just insane. 10 systems to manage one payments process. So I agree with you. It's really astounding. And it's something we've heard over many years of serving customers, talking to prospects, being in the market. So I would reframe that kind of striking data point and ask those in the audience or who are thinking about payment operations changes to put that on its head and think about looking at payment operations as a holistic challenge that needs a holistic solution. And of course, Modern Treasury is one that addresses all those points, Chris, that you laid out in the beginning, but there are others. And I think the biggest shift in the market, or the thing I would encourage teams considering this to do, is to look at the whole process beginning to end and bring technology to the whole thing as one problem. And I feel like that's a big shift that will up-level the conversations and improve outcomes for those investing here.
Thanks, Rachel. You teed me up really well for my question for Connor, which is, Connor, what have you seen as some best practices for implementing better payment operations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what people need to kind of grasp is that there are two functional components to having an amazing payment operations system and payments infrastructure, and that is the payments ecosystem itself, the actual movement of money and how you instrument that. So what are those APIs to do that programmatically? And then, of course, all of the other issues and problems that come up when you actually move lots of money, particularly large sums of money, or having, hundreds of thousands of transactions within that ecosystem, or if you're using multiple service providers, which is often the case, as you can tell in the state of operations report. To dive into those two functional components, the payments ecosystem and the back office management, we'll start with the payment ecosystem. So these are all the steps that you need to embed payments into your business and your product at scale. And many of you probably have already done that to some extent. And to effectively, stand up a payments ecosystem in sort of the modern tech stack, or to move it away from the batching old day processes that we used to have before to the sort of real-time modern, customer demand oriented approach, you need automatic and programmatic payments. So those are RESTful APIs that are modern, that you can expect to have high uptimes and work very often, complete with webhooks, which are developer tools that actually tell us that there are key events that happened, like did a payment actually go through? And you often might want to do that across multiple payment rails. And that's because you might have international use cases where you want local payouts or local debit abilities. You also might want faster payments in certain instances. If you were DoorDash or something like that, you might want, an instant payout to your Dasher or push to debit card so that they're funded right away. In order to enable all of that, you can use payment service providers and third-party processors. But we also talk about people working directly with big banks, and those big banks have powerful suites of technology that, while sometimes can be difficult to integrate with, or if you want to do multiple integrations, payment operations services like Modern Treasury enable that to be easy, can really get access to rails that are cheaper and faster. And then, of course, the other part is the bank relationships themselves. When you're working with a bank directly, you are in the flow of funds, which has a whole bunch of context, and we have good journal articles about that. But you have full control of your payments ecosystem and how the flow of funds actually operates. And that's really, really important if you're embedding payments into your product. Like I said, if you go and you do all of that work and you're using multiple, providers, you need an actual operating system to bring that all together, normalize the data, and allow you to operationalize it. I'm sure we have many finance ops or FinOps folks in the room, controllers, treasurers, et cetera, who live in a world of amazingly designed spreadsheets. And I've been the benefactor of that before in my career. But also sort of trying to figure out how do they stitch together different software providers to accomplish, the closing of books every month. And so when we talk about a back office management tool to handle the complexity of money movement, you need to sort of implement operational tooling. And so this includes compliance programs. Do I know that something's fraudulent? Am I monitoring all those transactions? Do I know the customers, B2B or B2C, are viable to send money to? Am I following OFAC rules? And of course, those are critical if you're working directly with a bank. Do I have payment controls? Do I have my four-eyed controls analysis, workflow set up? And can I detect when something is actually going wrong? And am I automatically alerted? And if something's not, working correctly on the control side, I can do something about it. Your database ledger, right? So at the application level for embedding it into your product, or simply just to know where all your cash balances are at any one time. We'll talk about ClassPass in a sec. And I distinctly, remember our CFO talking about needing to understand that before money actually settles in bank accounts and know it virtually, because we were running a credits model. And then, of course, automatic reconciliation. So knowing that things are transacting, being able to compare them to their sources, and know that at settlement, that all the cash in the bank statements are actually executed and clear to everyone in the business, and ultimately syncing that to our general ledgers so that within our ERP system, we can close that and close our books and have high confidence. And then, of course, in the cases of non-automation, when remittance information might not be there, being able to detect that and operationalize that and go and solve cases with each other. And so what Modern Treasury does is to service that sort of operating system, let you join all of those different services and have one normalized data architecture that then has a bunch of tools that you can actually operationalize sort of key workflows that are critical to running your business, making sure that it's maintained and making sure that things are delivered on time all the time. And then, of course, we do programmatic payments, which is sort of the modern way of executing money movement. So super, super excited to talk to everybody and curious to hear about all the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. That's really helpful context. And I know that you have prepared a couple of use cases for us for how Modern Treasury customers are getting value out of modernizing their payment operations. So do you want to take us through some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will do my alma mater, which is ClassPass. I used to work there, and so it's very fun to talk about this. When I was in seat, actually, we really struggled with our payouts process and how do we pay 40,000 studios on time every month with all this money that we're collecting from subscribers, and we were collecting that from a credit card, converting it into credit transactions, then trying to reconvert that back into a studio payout, and then make sure that all that gets delivered on time globally across 18 different countries. Sounds like a very difficult problem. A lot of tools are there to kind of make that easier, but ultimately the thing that we were missing was sort of this application database where we could track all the different transactions, know at any moment in time for any given account, which was a studio, knowing how much we owed them at any moment, and then being able to roll that up into a complete view. So our CFO, Tom Aviston, who's now the CFO of ClassPass, could actually know exactly where cash was at any moment in time. And that not only unlocked their ability on the finance side to be able to deliver payouts very frequently and much more frequently than monthly, which is super valuable for the studios. They had high confidence that everything was correctly computed. And then the other component, of course, is on the developer side. Our Modern Treasury's Ledger product actually enabled that development team to track that system-wide across all the different PSPs that were used, as well as do that credit modeling that was so difficult. And now that data is being used not only for the financial case, but also in the product to make sure that things are executed correctly, like refunds, and also to do currency transaction conversion, which for ClassPass meant credits. So super cool. Really excited to help them in the future work on programmatic payments and potentially work with a bank. Pipe, awesome. Very exciting company. Pipe's business specifically is using us to transfer funds to their customers to route monthly payments generated from customers to financial institutions. And so this is a company that's been with us for a while, growing really quickly, amazing design partner, but has a very difficult, complex money movement problem, and they needed to be able to do that and work directly with the bank. And we enabled that, as well as the sort of reconciliation capability, which comes automated, and that's super valuable. And making sure that they can move money successfully has been invaluable to their business. And now we're sort of following them in their international growth as well. Yeah, the last example, Trip Actions. I'm sure many of you know this company and have used it directly. Super excited to have them as a partner. They're using us programmatically to track, initiate, and reconcile employee reimbursements across 6 bank payment methods, so 6 different payment methods across a single API. And so one of the value propositions that we talked about when we're saying embedding payments in your product at scale is being able to use a single set of endpoints to execute a multitude of transactions over different rails, potentially different banks, potentially different service providers. And as a developer or product manager, be able to execute that very, very quickly without doing a very significant set of technical work. And then, of course, on top of that, they're getting the benefit of having reporting and reconciliation and controls. And that's coming through the operating system and its dashboard itself, which, we had talked about teams and how they want to spend their time. We want people to be able to spend their time on their core product. And, you know, when Rachel and Dimitri were talking about payment operations, it's already happening in your business. And we're trying to say, let's think about that in totality, take that operational complexity out of your sort of problem set so that you can focus on delivering, you know, your business needs. And across these companies, these customers will tell you that, you know, we've helped enable that, and it's been integral to them getting back product management and engineering time. But don't forget all the operational complexity time that's also saved. And so really exciting.
Thanks, Connor. That's super helpful to get those use cases. Now we'll go ahead and go into our Q&A portion. We've seeded some questions from our audience today from social media and from our webinar forum. But since we are live, I do want to say if you're listening and you didn't get to submit a question, feel free to do so and we'll try to get to them. But let's go ahead and start with this one. And this one's for Dimitri. What experiences have you had that led you to explore payment operations as a new category?
Yeah, Modern Treasury came out of a firsthand experience that I had. So, you know, I was working for an online mortgage company. We had pretty complex payment operations at scale. So we had, you know, sort of a marketplace model. So we had the borrower financings, wires going out to actually, you know, purchase houses. We had ongoing servicing, kind of ACH debit servicing happening every month. We had investor facing both capital markets, large institutional investors and retail investors, kind of fractional investors who were coming in and buying fractions of these loans. And then all of a sudden, every ACH debit that comes in has to get fractionalized and put in the right wallet. And the individual investor can then reinvest it or withdraw it, or, you know, and the number of permutations of all this, the number of bank accounts that we had to manage, a number of moments when individual teams across the company would come to me as the PM kind of in charge of it, with questions around a bank statement, highlighted in yellow, saying like, what is this? And who approved it? And should it have happened on this date? And, you know, and you multiply that, you know, I think there's an element of payments that is, you know, how do you initiate an individual single payment? And that is an important question, but the problems that you face when you're doing that at large scale are just completely different. You start having to be able to answer questions about what is happening, what's in flight right now. What is the kind of moment in time snapshot of my business, and how do I actually get that? And I think, you know, that it's one of those things that when you see enough of it, when you go through enough of these situations, you kind of take a step back and you think about, why do people join a finance team? People join a finance team because they want to be a steward of the business. They want to think about the strategic questions. They want to build an efficient company. And, you know, we all know, anybody who's kind of been around finance processes, you know, quarters end on 4th of July, they end on Christmas, like they end on the least convenient times personally to be going into, you know, 10 p.m. It's Friday, you're digging in a G sheet from last Tuesday, you're trying to understand those 9.5 systems that Rachel mentioned. How do you get out of a CSV out of the ERP and compare it to the bank statement and take it, you know, like that's the stuff that's like 80% of the day-to-day work. And it's actually something computers are good at. But the elements of connecting all this just did not exist. And so that was a lot of what led us to kind of start Modern Treasury, to try to say, hey, like there's a lot of busy work and, you know, error-prone manual work that nobody really wants to be doing. That's not why they joined the finance team, but that is what the job has become. You know, we can fix some of that.
Thanks, Dimitri. This next one, or these next questions are for anybody, but maybe this next one we can start with Rachel. With embedded payments, non-traditional companies are becoming payments companies, and non-traditional payments players are making decisions about payments. How do you make the case for payment operations to these new players?
I would say that's sort of what Connor alluded to, which is it's already there. You are, as if you're operating a business, you're receiving money and pushing money out somehow in your systems. Like it's part of being a viable business. So again, I would reframe the question not like as making a case for a thing, but as looking at what's already happening as something that can be solved, enabled, and made more efficient with technology. And that's a pretty big shift. But yeah, it's I mean, the spreadsheets and Post-its and processes and highlighters, whatever you're using, those systems are already in your company, lurking in the corners, hiding in the closets. So it's more about acknowledging that, putting it into the sunlight, looking at it as a problem that technology and operational systems can address, and then moving the business forward with that knowledge, with that sort of acceptance.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. We got a question from one of our audience members, Ninan Thampi. Any plans to support credit card payment rails like Visa Direct and MasterCard Send?
Ooh, anyone want to address the elephant in the room, or Dimitri, Rachel, or do you want me to take that?
Take it, Connor.
Someday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the answer is probably. And it depends, which are two, great political answers to any great question. No, I think, thinking of what's that, Rachel?
Product leaders love those answers.
Exactly. It depends on the roadmap and, feasibility and attractiveness. No, I think it's a great question. Those are critical payment rails for acquiring funds. And right now our customers are sort of defining our roadmap, right? Any good, decent product person, and I'm trying to be that person, would say, follow your customers. Our customers right now are asking for debit cards and pushing to debit. And that's something that we're definitely focused on. On the credit card ecosystem, certainly marketplace businesses, obviously are collecting funds over credit cards. We're probably going to start with, let's solve the finance ops, payment ops problem with that. So when those transactions occur and hit that, credit card processor, you can see all those transactions in that place. But ultimately, those transactions roll up into what finance folks might call a net settlement onto actual bank statement with your bank that's actually has the cash. And it's fairly difficult to reconcile all those payment transactions to that and to reconcile that against the rest of the bank statement. So we have followed customers to solve that specific problem, and there's some work that we're doing there. And again, we're trying to position ourselves as more of that payments operations operating system, right? Like single pane of glass, see all your transaction data in one place and be able to operate against it. That said, we are working on other tools like iframing and hosted / embeddable experiences where people can pay in and people can add accounts and whatnot. And so it might only be natural as we meet customers who have that need to help them do that more effectively. But we can also partner with other service providers to do that. So if you have that need and you're interested in trying to solve your payment ops problem and credit cards are a critical rail within that ecosystem, hit us up.
Thanks, Connor. We have another live question from Matt Twymer. How do you suggest measuring or justifying building your own versus buying something like Modern Treasury?
Don't build it. No.
Well, I think there's, just to jump in here, I think one way to think about ROI is really around like, what are the capabilities that you should be focusing your team on? I mean, we all live in a world of constrained resources, constrained engineering resources specifically. I think that there is two kind of ways to think about the problem or the question. And one way to think about the question is, in an unconstrained world, what is the right way to think about ROI, and where the problems that you have in your business are going to be addressed by vendors, whether it's Modern Treasury or others, that can actually solve that problem for you, and you can get started in a week or two, and you can get time to value and time to business, and time to learning really about your business starts a lot earlier. So I think that's sort of the unconstrained way to think about it. The other more realistic world kind of view, I think, is the constrained way, which is, we believe that, building something that really works and is stable and has the internal tools, has the ability to push data to warehouse solutions and enable, individual kind of internal workflow, ops and customer service and other teams to see what's happening. Those types of things become necessary at scale. And so like you're essentially inheriting or taking on that future tech debt as soon as you start building something that is kind of not just the integration to initiate a payment or to reconcile an individual payment. It's really the operating system, as Connor said, about building the entirety of your business. So I think the ROI on that is really think of it as, what are the things that you will have to build, not just integration, but all the internal tools and workflows. And in our experience over the past 4 years, it has taken us 150 or so people to build this. That is not to say that everything that we've built is going to be relevant for your business, but it's not easy to build that well. It's not easy to build that and maintain that at a reliability level that you want from that type of product. And so, we're happy to kind of dive in and talk about ROI for specific use cases. But at the end of the day, we believe that we're building something that, is core to us. It's what we do. It's not really, core to most companies to be experts in understanding and reconciling and reading through Nacha files and BI2 files and the SFTP file drops and the API calls and the accounting system integrations, and I can keep going. But it's a surprisingly deep field once you actually get into it.
Yeah, thank you. We'll go back to, on that note, one of the questions we got from the webinar forum, which is, how can modern technology like this help address payment errors, especially the unanticipated ones that come with leading/bleeding edge use cases?
I think that's exactly related to what Dimitri talked about. So when folks are considering build versus buy, they might think about the happy path and the limited things that happen with payments. But the truth and reality is so much more complex, varied, and complicated than that. So a very good payment operation systems provides many, many tiers of support when it comes to errors and exception handling. There's, of course, like the developer tooling and observability that Connor alluded to. Then there's systems that will resolve some basic errors on their own. Like, for example, there's some ACH return codes that we can action on with no human intervention. That's an immediate lift for an entire category of exceptions. And then if it clears all the technical bars, then you want to have another set of layers operationally, right? So you want to have workflows and alarm and alerting systems that go to people. And then after all that, so you have the technical layers, there's multiple of those. There's operational layers and multiple of those. And then at the end, you want reporting and maximum information about what's going on so you can invest in the places that are most commonly becoming hiccups. So I think that's the perfect example of an unseen unknown for many people who are diving into this stuff from the beginning. And relying on an external vendor that does this at massive scale just brings all that to your door right away.
Perfect answer. You can have my job.
Your old job, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, with that, I'll say thank you to our panelists. Thanks so much for joining us today. To everybody who was able to join. We are at time, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.